The great Taoist sage Zhuangzi has a warning for humanity and each and every one of us on a personal level when we forget our true nature and the nature of the Tao itself. Let me explain this warning to you. When people think about Taoism, they think it's all rainbows and sunshine and harmony and this and that. But the true fact of the matter is Taoism is a critique of society itself and is actually critical in a lot of sense to how the world has become. And Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, two great Taoist sages that we could say are the core of Taoist thought in general, are often critical of how the world has become, and especially Zhuangzi. But Zhuangzi uses humor to critique society. Back in his time, in the Warring States period of China, Taoism was essentially a critique of Confucianism because Confucius and Confucianism in general is an overly serious philosophy. And as we know about Taoism, Taoism is very chill and about following the way of nature, as opposed to setting up a system that is supposed to, in some sense, inculcate the Tao within us. This was what Confucius believed, right? Where Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi rightly pointed out that the Tao is natural and no social system can replicate that because it's moving through us naturally. It will move through society as well once the society is set up, but it moves through us naturally in the sense when we are not shaped by the world, right? So we have to continually move back to our natural state. And so Zhuangzi, when he was looking at the Warring States period, he was looking at how people were moving into this type of Confucian thought, and he could see how their characters and their very being was being shaped according to Confucian philosophy. And so in that time, he was seeing how they were getting farther and farther away from the true nature of the Tao. Now, if Zhuangzi could see the world today, oh my Lord, he would roll in his grave for sure. But as I said, Taoism is a critique of any time. It doesn't matter whether it's the Warring State period, we can use the Zhuangzi text to critique society today. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Zhuangzi text, I highly recommend getting the complete works of Zhuangzi, translation by the great Burton Watson. I highly recommend this version to read and study so that you understand the deeper tenets, not just of Taoism, but of life itself. Now, because of all of this, of everything that I've said, Zhuangzi had a very stern warning for us. And in typical Zhuangzi and Taoist fashion, he is being very real and he's not pulling any punches. He's just telling it like it is. And it's a warning for us, not just as a society, but also on an individual level. Let me read this warning to you. When people are asleep, their spirits wander off. When they are awake, their bodies are like an open door, so that everything they touch becomes an entanglement. Day after day, they use their minds to stir up trouble. They become boastful, sneaky, secretive. They are consumed with anxiety over trivial matters, but remain arrogantly oblivious to the things truly worth fearing. Their words fly from their mouths like crossbow bolts, so sure are they that they know right from wrong. They cling to their positions as though they had sworn an oath, so sure are they of victory. Their gradual decline is like autumn fading into winter. This is how they dwindle day by day. They drown in what they do. You cannot make them turn back. They begin to suffocate as though sealed up in a box. This is how they decline into senility. And as their minds approach death, nothing can cause them to turn back toward the light. As I said, Zhuangzi is not pulling any punches here. He's letting us have it. And especially back in the Warring States period, he was letting them have it as well. But isn't it a great quote? And it's very profound in a sense because he's actually just showcasing that what the world in some sense has become. In all of this striving for wealth, fame, success, particularly in the modern world, right? When we look at social media and we look at business in general, there's such an emphasis on hustle culture and this and that. And Zhuangzi would just laugh all day long if he saw the modern world. And so when we look at this passage, Zhuangzi is really highlighting the unconsciousness of the world, right? The way that the people and societies and culture in general act in such an unconscious way and don't even think about the consequences of their actions. Because, as he said, we've already made up that we are right and they are wrong. And so you've got this mentality all around the world where I'm right and you're wrong, and you think you're right and I'm wrong. And so we argue over trivial matters, as he says, but we ignore what's really worth fearing and really worth understanding, but we don't care less about that because we are so consumed with all of these trivial matters. And so what happens to us on an individual level, right? So if we look at us on an individual level, when we follow this type of unconscious mentality of society, we move into this realm where we dissect the world up into this and that. And so to use the teachings of Zhuangzi, Zhuangzi mentioned the Taoist idea of Qing, which is referring to species-specific essence. And he's saying that our species-specific essence is to dissect between this and that, to have this overly analytical perspective, which he calls a flaw. And so we all live like that through our life. Most of our lives, actually, from cradle to grave. And we never wake up once. And this is the problem that Zhuangzi is saying, that this is compounding generation after generation and getting worse and worse. And so we're moving so far away from the light, from the Tao, that we don't even know that it even exists. Most people in the modern world wouldn't know it exists because they are so caught up in trivial matters and so caught up with things that don't really matter at all because they want to defend their position or they want to uphold their belief system, which they want to promote on the world, which they want to superimpose on everyone else. And so this ensures their survival. And so Zhuangzi would say, you are just acting from a state of survival. You are not actually flowing with the river of the Tao. You are in this protection mode. You are trying to protect your belief systems. You are trying to protect your likes and dislikes. And so that's how you move through the world. And so you cut the world up into this and that because it makes you feel comfortable. It makes your conditioning feel comfortable. And so that's how words can fly out of your mouth like crossbow bolts, right? You just spout out whatever you want to say, and it causes a lot of harm on others. And it also causes harm on yourself because you're acting from a place of unconsciousness. You're acting from a place of hypnosis. It's not the real you speaking. The real you is undifferentiated, not differentiated. It's not the ego persona system. The real you is at its core the Tao. That's who you truly are. But you think you're this person here, and this person acts as a dam in the river. It blocks the river. It blocks the energy of the Tao to move through you. But you need to destroy that dam so that the river's power becomes your power when you flow down the river. This is the virtue. And that virtue will move through you because you aren't holding on to the banks of the river anymore and you are not trying to fight the current of the river. You are just moving as one with it and you are moving towards the light, not away from it. And so Zhuangzi here highlights that as we continually live, we continually decline. Our spirit begins to diminish. And sometimes you see this in an individual, right, where the light in their eyes begins to become very dim. It's noticeable in some individuals when they go down this path of hustle culture, of trying to fight for their beliefs, of this and that. The light within them begins to dwindle. And then, as he mentions, we continually decline and move into senility, and so forth and so on. And so there is no chance to move back towards the light. And Zhuangzi cleverly uses autumn fading into winter, right? And he understands that we are nature. And that's how it actually is, the process of life. When we fall into that hypnosis of this man-made construct in our mind, then we aren't natural. We've shaped ourselves to such an extent that we don't know what our original nature even was. And this is the two different aspects of Taoism versus Confucianism. And Confucianism here can stand as a representation of all modern cultures and societies. Because when we contrast Taoism to Confucianism, you've got in Taoism the uncarved block metaphor, or the unhewn wood. And that means we stick to what is natural. We stick to what we were before the socialization process began within us. So we move back towards that and we stick to that. But the other contrasting perspective is the Confucian perspective of the carving and polishing metaphor. So Confucius's perspective was that we need to carve and shape ourselves so that we accord with the society and the culture around us. And look, that works to a certain extent, and obviously one should be a law-abiding citizen and so forth and so on. But the deeper level here is that we lose our naturalness. And so part of this is two different perspectives. So one perspective is that from the Taoist perspective, when we look at the uncarved block metaphor, is that we are naturally good from birth. We are naturally good from birth. And you find this also in Mencius's philosophy as well. But the philosophy that Confucius follows, and the one that the modern society follows as well, is that we are beasts from birth, so we need to be cultivated, we need to be domesticated, we need to be trained a certain way so that we fit in the world around us. Now, this training is done by almost everyone. Our parents will do this. We are trained by the environment that we are around. We might be trained by education. We might grow up in a single parent family which trains us in a certain way. There are all these dynamics that can happen. They can train you a certain way to shape you to become something that you're actually not. Because the real nature of ourselves from birth is that we were fundamentally good and happy and joyful and peaceful until the socialization process began. Now, some of us endure stricter socialization process than others. Some of us might have been blessed to be born into a yogi's family, for example. And so there might still be some sort of shaping there, but not to the degree that maybe someone in America has to undergo, for example. And so what Zhuangzi is trying to tell us is that we are fundamentally good. We need to move back to the uncarved block. We need to stop shaping ourselves according to what we think is right. We need to understand that we weren't beasts from birth. We became beasts because of the society around us. A lot of the violence and conflict that you see around the world is from that carving and polishing metaphor. It's not from the unhewn wood. And so the more that you hold this carving and polishing position, the more you begin to drown in what you do day by day, as Zhuangzi said. So we need to free ourselves from that. Zhuangzi is constantly telling us to free our mind from this subjective viewpoint that we think is the reality, because it's not the reality. These are rose-colored glasses that you are seeing the world with, but it's not actually how the world is. But Zhuangzi is warning us here. The more we follow this, the more we follow the unconsciousness of society, the more we will continually forget the Tao. And so we can't do that. We got to cease following these motives that society think is right for you. You have to stop chasing fame and wealth and success and so forth and so on. If that comes to you naturally, then all well and good. If it doesn't come to you naturally, all well and good. This is what Zhuangzi is saying. We're often the victims of comparison, right? We're comparing our lives to others. That is the thief of joy, as Theodore Roosevelt once said. Comparison is the thief of joy. And so we're moving through our life and we're all following the same path. That path of being in conflict with one another due to our own conditioning, of trying to hold our position and advance our position in the world at the cost of others, instead of freeing our mind from all of this hypnosis and allowing our life to become a piece of the universe, rather than fighting the universe, but allowing the Tao's power to become your power. And then what will be, will be. That is the true teachings of Taoism. It's not to fight the world, but to accept it and to get rid of the motives that drive society and culture, because the motives of society and culture are built on the survival of the ego. But once you understand the teachings of the Zhuangzi, the ego itself has never existed, because the true nature of yourself is truly and fundamentally that ultimate reality of the Tao. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.